A chance to address Albertans about our province's path forward with the federal government following a special meeting with our government caucus last Friday. I also met with Prime Minister Mark Carney last Friday, where we spoke at length about the policies and legislation that are holding back Alberta's economy. This conversation was a positive first step, but it will take tremendous effort and cooperation to repair the damage to Alberta's economy caused in the last 10 years by Ottawa's destructive anti-resource agenda. Yesterday, I shared the bold steps that our government is taking to protect and stand up for Alberta's future with strength and resolve. And this includes the creation of a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government in pursuit of a new Alberta Accord with Canada. This team will request reforms to guarantee port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for Alberta energy and resources, and all federal interference in the development of our provincial resources by repealing harmful federal laws like the No More Pipelines Law C-69 and the Net Zero Electricity Regulations, require Alberta's consent before imposing any export taxes or restrictions on our resources, and to grant Alberta the same per capita federal transfers as Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. We are also launching the Alberta Next panel to explore long-term options for economic and constitutional protections from Ottawa. And we are preparing for a 2026 referendum on key proposals that emerge from these discussions. As most Albertans know, I have repeatedly stated I do not support Alberta separating from Canada. I personally still have hope that there is a path forward for a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. So I am going to do everything within my power to negotiate a fair deal for Alberta with the new Prime Minister. And while doing so, our government will work with Albertans on various initiatives to better protect Alberta's provincial sovereignty and economy from Ottawa should those negotiations fail and the economic attacks continue. In the months ahead, there will be many who will try to sow fear and anger among us, those who want to see Alberta divided. Regardless of what each of us believes about this issue and what path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues with our friends, family members, and neighbours. I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the best solution for this immense challenge we face and come out of it stronger and more free than ever. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Perfect. We'll start off with questions here in the room before going to the phones. One question, one follow-up. I see hands. Wonderful. We'll start with Michelle, then we'll go to Catherine.
Michelle Belfontaine, CBC. Premier, Chiefs from Treaties 6, 7, 8, 4, and 10 are speaking about the possibility of a sovereignty referendum in about an hour. Now, they have overwhelmingly said that they oppose this kind of referendum and say it violates their treaties. So why are you giving separatists the chance to force a referendum question next year?
I'm not sure what their sovereignty referendum would be. I mean, they already have sovereignty within a united Canada. They have absolute jurisdiction over their own treaty territories, the reserves, and so I'm not quite sure what they would be asking for.
A referendum on separation, it's out there. And the Bill 54 has made it easier for people to force a citizens' initiative referendum and have it put to the Alberta people. And you have said that this would be included next year. Well, so what would you say to treaty chiefs who are saying we have a treaty with the Crown and separating from Canada violates our treaties?
Well, I would say that we're sort of a number of steps away from having that conversation. We have put forward a suite of changes to elections law that included making a petition campaign achievable. I think that there's no point in having a referendum, citizen-initiated referendum, with barriers that are so high that it's kind of vicious compliance. And so that was the conversation we've had over the last year prior to the most recent election and prior to any of the discussions you're talking about, is that if you genuinely want citizens to be able to identify issues they care about, be able to put it forward to the people, you have to have a reasonable signature threshold. Our threshold is a little bit lower than Saskatchewan's, but a little bit higher than what we see in the United States. It's consistent with what we've had for many decades in the Municipal Government Act. So it shouldn't be that surprising that we're just trying to get some clarity so that people know what the process is if they want to take forward issues that they think matter to Albertans.
And we'll go to Catherine.
Yeah, and in asking for this guaranteed access to the 3 oceans, how does that respect other provincial jurisdictions?
the federal government was given trade and commerce power when we came together as territories in order to enable access to markets. In fact, there's quite a bit of law internationally that says that if you are a separate nation, one nation cannot landlock another. It's sort of a given that it is inappropriate use of power to prevent a jurisdiction from being able to get its resources to market. And so that is the thinking that we have around this, is that it's the constitutional authority of Ottawa to enable this to happen. And they have managed to in the past. The Coastal GasLink pipeline, despite a lot of extra cost, uncertainty, still did manage to get built, and LNG Canada will be open soon and will be exporting. And despite 6 times the cost associated with Trans Mountain Pipeline, it also managed to get built. And so I think we have seen that when there are important strategic decisions that need to be made, strategic infrastructure, the federal government does have the power to be able to get resources to market. And so I would say that we signed on to it, all of the provinces, along with the new Prime Minister, just prior to the election, saying that we all agree to economic corridors that include oil and gas pipelines. So I'm just reaffirming that that was the commitment on the part of all of the provinces prior to the election, and I hope it's the commitment of all of the provinces now that the election's over.
And there's a municipal election coming up in October. Should the citizen initiative referendum meet the threshold before then, why not hold it then? Why the timing of 2026?
I think there was a referendum question or two asked in conjunction with the municipals in the past. And I mean, I suppose that's an option. I just don't think that the timing will work in this case. It's 120-day. First of all, we have to proclaim the law. It has to get through the legislature. It has to be proclaimed into law. They have to change the regulations with Elections Alberta. I'm not sure quite when Elections Alberta will be ready to be able to oversee and launch a petition campaign. Any citizen would have to have a question that is approved in advance. That takes a little bit of time, 120-day signature collection period, and then I think it's a couple of months to be able to validate the signatures. So as you can see, with this whole process, I think it'd be impossible to try to get any questions in alignment with the municipal elections.
We'll go to Emmanuel, and then we'll come to Shay.
Emmanuel Castrovet, Greater Canada. Canada has had 2 independence referendums in the past. Prior to the 1980 referendum in Quebec, René Lévesque did campaign openly on this referendum and won in 76. Jacques Parizeau did the same in 94, just before the 95 referendum. However, you did not campaign on opening the door to a separation referendum. You essentially campaigned on a tax cut and standing up to Ottawa. So do you have the mandate to open such a door to Alberta separating from the rest of Canada?
Yeah, I don't have a mandate, and my party doesn't support that. My party quite clearly in their founding documents came together and they support a strong, united Canada, protecting constitutional sovereignty, and that's what I've been doing. A citizen-initiated referenda would be, by definition, initiated by citizens. And so I won't prejudge what issues citizens might want to put on the table, but that is up to citizens to decide and to get the number of signatures. All I've said is I will honor the process. And the public very clearly knows that we are a party of direct democracy, that we do believe in things like citizen initiative and recall that happened under my predecessor. And so I would leave it to the people, but that's why I have been pretty clear that I do not support separatism myself. I support a strong, sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and that's what I'll keep working towards.
And one part of your rhetoric against the federal policies in energy is that it would bring more uncertainty to the sector and also make investments go away from the province. Don't you think that such a referendum on separation would also be likely to do that? That's certainly what the rest of Canada said to Quebec about their 2 referendums. Well,
I guess I'll wait and see if any questions come forward, if anything gets registered, if 177,000 signatures get accumulated. I mean, I think you're jumping ahead a number of steps. None of that has happened right now. There isn't a question on the table. There isn't an active petition campaign. All there is a process. And I think we have to accept that there's a lot of anger out there. A lot of anger after the last election, a lot of anger at the way we've been treated for the last 10 years. And there's a lot of groups that are organizing to try to do something about it. We may disagree about what the path forward is. All I can tell you is my path forward is to try to do whatever I can to try to get a fair deal for Alberta. And that's why I've already engaged constructively with the Prime Minister on that.
Just having the talks in the public opinion about maybe Alberta separating from the rest of Canada is is bad for Alberta?
Well, those talks have been going on for some time. The level of support for a motion like that, I've been monitoring this for decades, and it's always ebbed and flowed, been as high as 30% in the past. I think it might be a little bit higher today, but that has always been in the background in Alberta electoral politics, and it's just happened to flare up right now. But that is, citizens have a right. I believe in free speech. Citizens have a right to express their opinion on things that they're concerned about, and I think it's my job to make sure that debate is respectful, that sides know that they have a right to be able to have those conversations with their friends and family and not to be demonized for it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to create an environment where the conversation can be had.
Thanks, Manuel. And we'll go to Shay, and then we're going to go to the phones for a couple before coming back to the room.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Originally, you had issued that list of 9 demands with a 6-month deadline back in March. Now you've issued a new list of goals for the Alberta Accord, no clear deadline. I guess why change those goalposts, and what is your plan if these negotiations are unsuccessful?
This is just more detail on the existing goalposts that I had set. We're doing our consultation between May and October. That's the same 6-month time frame that I had mentioned. At the same time, we're establishing a negotiating committee, and I hope to talk with the Prime Minister about who their counterparts will be at the federal level. We've had these kinds of joint task forces in the past. This would be a little bit more formalized with my ministers, and so that will be ongoing because I think we need to. We had our first conversation where I let him know the issues that we needed to work on together. I told him I'd be establishing a negotiating committee, and so we'll have 6 months to be able to work that through. Hopefully we'll get to an agreement earlier. We'll then at the same time have 6 months to travel the province with a committee to find out how Albertans are feeling and some of the issues they might want us to address. And again, I won't prejudge that. I don't know what kind of issues will be raised as we go through there, but we'll have those parallel processes, and I hope we can get to a constructive relationship with the new Prime Minister and address some of these things that have been an irritant for a number of years.
Just as a follow-up to that, my second question, what is my second part of that question is, what happens if those negotiations fail after your 6-month deadline? And then my follow-up, I guess just in terms of a scenario, either legally, economically, or politically, is there one in which Alberta could actually separate from Canada with its national parks, with all of the treaty negotiations? Is that even possible? Should all of those steps be followed with a citizen-led petition?
Well, I'm not going to walk into negotiations with the expectation that they're going to fail. I think that that's defeatist. I don't think that Prime Minister Carney walked into his meeting with Donald Trump today expecting it to fail. I think he walked in hopeful that they would come to an agreement and maybe start the Canada-U.S. free trade agreements. I guess we'll find out in another hour or so, or a couple of hours, about whether that is going to be the case. I'm hopeful that we actually can get those conversations restarted. And I'm equally hopeful that we'll have constructive conversations with the Prime Minister. So he knows my concerns. He didn't object to any of the issues that I had raised on the call that we had. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to find some common ground there. So I will see how that ultimately plays out, and then perhaps 6 months from now, if it's unsuccessful, we'll be able to have another conversation about what comes next.
Thanks, Shay. We're going to go to the phones for a couple questions. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Thank you. Dawn Braid at the Calgary Herald.
Premier, thanks for taking my question. David Cameron wasn't a separatist either when he enabled a Brexit referendum in Britain. What he did, fairly close to the beginning of that, was say that he would honor the result of the referendum, and of course was thoroughly shocked when it passed. So my question to you is, will you say today whether or not, if a referendum on separation should carry sometime next year, you will honor that and start, if the answer is yes to it, that you would honor it and start the process to separate Alberta from Canada?
I did say yesterday in my commentary that I will respect the wishes of Albertans. And so at the moment, they're a bit undefined about what it is Albertans want to do. There's been a number of different groups proposing different new relationships, different ways to express autonomy. So until I see an actual question with 177,000 signatures of Albertans that are supportive of it, it's difficult for me to know what that looks like. But I honor the process. I'm creating a process so that citizens do have a right to identify an issue and be able to bring it forward with the support of their fellow citizens so that it can be put to a referendum.
If the answer is fairly simple, the question is fairly simple. Do you want Alberta to separate from Canada. Would you be willing, if it was as simple and clear-cut as that, and there was a good-sized majority, would you be willing to proceed?
There's a lot of ifs in that. I think if an election were held today, it would get about 30% support. So that's why I want to make sure that those numbers do not get higher and those numbers end up going lower because we're successful in negotiating a new arrangement with Canada. That's my marching orders. I've heard pretty overwhelmingly from my caucus, from the people who have contacted my office, from the people I've consulted with, is that they want me to give it a try. We tried for 2.5 years with the Prime Minister that was in place when I got elected, and I'm going to try. I think that's the only thing that I can do, and hope that we have a different approach. And I think we've already seen evidence that we have a Prime Minister that's willing to change gears. He dropped the carbon tax minutes after he got elected because it was a policy that was driving up costs, creating a more unaffordable life for all Canadians, hated across the country, hated by all political parties. And so that's an evidence of some pragmatism. Well, we've got 9 more to go. And so I'm getting started on that to begin with.
Thanks, Dawn. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please? And then we'll come back to the room.
Thank you. Rob Ferguson at the Toronto Star.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering if you have any retort for Premier Doug Ford today after what he said in Toronto about the possible separatism referendum.
Well, Doug and I have a great friendship. We don't agree on everything. In fact, I think we supported different people in the last federal election. And so we don't have to agree on everything. But what I will say is we have a constructive conversation at the coffee table. I continue to look forward to having a constructive conversation with him at the coffee table. But he's the Premier of Ontario. I'm the Premier of Alberta. We just have different issues that we have to respond to in our respective jurisdictions.
Do you think he should stick in his own lane? Or, what do you say as any kind of a retort?
Well, I don't tell him how he should run his province, and I would hope that he doesn't tell me how I should run mine. But we have a very respectful relationship, and I hope that continues.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. We're going to come back to the room. We'll go to Graham, yourself.
Premier, just to it's clear, you're saying you would not sponsor or support a referendum on separation. You'd let Albertans deal with that. But you said there would be a referendum next year that you would be part of. Explain what that would be looking at.
Well, it depends what I hear from Albertans. There's a few things that I've heard. I've heard from our agriculture producers that they would like us to exercise Section 95 of the Constitution to take more control over managing agriculture issues because the federal government has come through with punitive changes that are preventing them from being able to run their operations. I'm thinking of the limitations on strychnine, which is going to result in massive crop losses, and other type of approaches. I've heard that that people want us to be able to have more economic immigrants. The federal government actually reduced our allotment of provincial nominees. That would be something, again, under Section 95 that has special status, and Quebec has been quite active in trying to advocate for more choice in the people who get permanent citizenship in their province. Those are a couple of things. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you. I've kind of raised those before, but there may be other things that do come up. I know that Quebec is interested in completely changing the relationship with Ottawa, being more like the way the European Union operates by collecting all the taxes and then just remitting to Ottawa their share. That's what we do right now with our municipalities. The municipalities collect all of the property taxes and then remit to us our share. And so it's not that unusual to think that we might be able to have an arrangement like that if Quebec is interested too. So those are a few things that I've mused about before. I see that we have some common cause with our friends in Quebec of wanting to pursue some of those same things. Those might be a few things that we would put to the people.
So a number of things then for referendums, because you mentioned California. You've said that in the past. You like what California's done. It's not hard to find entire books written about how things don't work in California when it comes to citizen-led initiatives. Quoting just one, they tend to create a sense of permanent revolution in California politics. No issue is settled for long. This is Troy Seneck, former speechwriter for George Bush, W. Bush. You have people saying this is a bad idea, that going down the road of direct democracy that California has can tie up things, as opposed to representative democracy. You're elected, and people can then pass judgment in 4 years or whatever, if they like it or not, as opposed to then constantly churning up people's feelings with constant referendum?
Well, we've had that debate in this province, and we've sided with referendums for a number of important issues. I mentioned this before, VLTs and prohibition. The Olympics vote in Calgary was put to a referendum. Fluoride was put to a referendum.
Separation.
Well, again, I won't prejudge what it is that citizens choose to get signatures on. It could be any number of things that they choose to get signatures on. But the point is, it allows for them to have a mechanism, because it may be that there are some things that are an irritant or something that needs to be addressed that the legislatures are not bringing forward, and that gives the people the power. I mean, yes, it's a philosophical argument. I know that there are some who think that all decisions should be made by representation, and then there are those of us who believe it's a combination. I don't think Albertans want to vote on every little thing, but I think they might want to vote on some big things. And so now they have an opportunity to decide what those big things are. They have since this legislation was first brought in the prior UCP government, and now they have a little bit more clarity around the rules and what the signatures need to be.
Thank you, and go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Sarah with Global News. I'm just wondering, why did you make the decision to have your speech yesterday at 3 o'clock, just a day before Carney's meeting with Trump?
I made the decision to have the speech a week after the election, a few days after I'd had a chance to meet with my caucus, a few days after I'd had a chance to meet and talk with Mark Carney. Those were the factors that I had under consideration about establishing that, and also because it was a very lengthy speech. As you probably saw, I didn't want to be reading my speech to you here today for 18 minutes, so I wanted to make sure that Eastern Canada knows all of our grievances. I don't think necessarily the reporting on Alberta's grievances are covered particularly well in Eastern Canada, but I know that people have been watching and wondering what was going to be happening in Alberta and our reaction, because Alberta was such an outlier. 65% of our people voted for a different political party. And so I wanted to be thoughtful in how I gave my response. And I think I was, and it was because of a lot of feedback that I got. But the timing was, it was a week after the election.
And do you think your message yesterday highlighted divisions in this country and weakened Canada's position heading into negotiations today with the U.S.?
I think that Prime Minister Carney has his work cut out for him, as we saw in the opening press conference with the president. And I'm really hopeful that behind closed doors they'll be able to have a meeting of the minds and come out with an agreement to restart the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement negotiations. We know that it's 18 months from now is when it expires. And I think for all of us, it would be a far greater benefit if we were able to get a renegotiation happening sooner. So I'll see. I'm just as hopeful as anyone else that they're able to have a reset on the relationship. I don't think it's any secret that the relationship with the prior Prime Minister was very poor, and I think led to a lot of the challenges that we've had over the last 5 or 6 months. So we'll see if Prime Minister Carney can reset that in the meeting he has today, and I'm hopeful that he can.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. We'll go to Lisa, then we're going to hop back to the phones.
Thanks, Sam. You've said that you are committed to upholding First Nation treaties and inherent rights. This is on the sovereignty referendum question, but the Referendum Act says a majority vote is binding on your government, 50% plus one. So if that vote passes, your government would be bound to follow that referendum choice. How exactly do you plan to uphold those treaties in the event that your government's hands are tied and you need to separate Alberta from Canada? How do you uphold those treaties? What does that involve?
Well, I think there's been lots of court challenges and court decisions around First Nations, Inuit, and Métis rights, and we would honor all of those. We have treaties that have been signed and are binding. We have as well Section 35 of the Constitution, which enshrines Aboriginal rights. Any discussion that we're having, is including Alberta's expressing its own constitutional sovereignty, is about Alberta's relationship with Ottawa. We have also defined rights under our Constitution about Alberta's relationship with Ottawa and how that's supposed to work. And I have never presumed that anything that we can do is going to impact First Nations rights. In fact, I've said the opposite, that we accept it and respect the fact that they are sovereign jurisdictions in their own right. This is about trying to have Alberta's relationship with Ottawa improve.
And just a follow-up to that, I mean, you're saying that you never presumed it would impact Indigenous treaty rights, but we've got a large group of them representing just about every treaty, I think, in this country, saying this is a violation of their treaty rights. And what you, like, generally what you're saying today is that you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. You don't want to presume that this referendum is necessarily happening or that it will pass. Did you not think about these things ahead of time? Did you not think about what would happen if you opened the door and lowered the bar for citizens to initiate a referendum in this province?
Well, I guess I have to wait and see what kind of question comes forward from citizens before I would be able to make a judgment about whether or not it would impact rights. But what I have said is that you can't vote away treaty rights. You can't vote away Indigenous rights. You can't have a referendum on things that are enshrined in our various constitutional conventions and laws and court decisions. So I'll wait and see what sort of referendum questions come forward, but my expectation would be that that those rights would be honored.
Thanks, Lisa. We're going to go back to the phones for our last few questions. Operator, could you put through the next caller, please?
Thank you. Tamar Durrani from the Globe and Mail.
Thank you, Premier Smith, for taking our questions today. My first question is about your speech from yesterday. Premier, you said that you don't personally support Alberta's separation from Canada, and you also said that you want several Liberal policies from over the last decade, particularly about energy, to be abolished by Ottawa. At the same time, you said you're going to allow discussions of potential separation to be brought up at these town halls that you'll be chairing with the new panel, all of which could lead to a referendum with the possible question of separation next year. Do you believe these actions from your government will impact the negotiations for a new fair deal you want your special Alberta negotiating team to have with Ottawa? And in turn, do you think these actions will affect Ottawa's negotiations with Washington, where President Donald Trump has said he wants to make Canada its 51st state?
Well, I would hope that the near-death experience of the Liberals, where they were almost obliterated and had to change out their leader, was actually a wake-up moment for them, that they can't continue pursuing extremist policies that are supported by a fringe group of legislators like the NDP or the Bloc Québécois. And I would hope that that near-death experience made them realize that what Canadians want and Albertans want is to be an economic superpower that includes energy, includes food, includes getting all of our resources to market. I mean, if anyone should look at the results of the last few months and say, gee, it's time to recalibrate, it should be the current Prime Minister. So that's why I'm very hopeful, having talked to him and said now is the time for us to make good on the commitments that were made prior to the election, that were a joint communique released with all the premiers, and to make sure that we actually enact the things that were agreed to. As I said in my speech yesterday, that Albertans expect action, not just words. And so that's why I'm very hopeful that somebody who ran on a mandate to start doing the kind of things we're talking about is going to be serious about removing the barriers to make it happen. So that's my starting point going into the discussions.
Thank you, Premier. My second question is a bit tangential. It's related to the Alberta Health Services investigation. Premier Smith, in light of the Globe and Mail's reporting on Alberta's Justice Minister, Mickey Emery, being a longtime friend and relative through marriage of Sam Raish, whose business dealing with the health authority are tied to a lawsuit and multiple investigations, do you believe this is a conflict of interest for the province? I want to be clear here before you answer. I'm not asking necessarily about whether this is against Alberta's Conflict of Interest Act. I'm asking this question because I want to know whether you think this is an appropriate relationship for the sitting Justice Minister and Deputy House Leader of Alberta to have with Mr. Raish.
I'm not sure what you expect him to do. Should he divorce his wife so he doesn't have a relationship with the cousin anymore? Like, I think you're being unrealistic. We all have relationships. And the key for conflict of interest is that you cannot make decisions on anything that might benefit a private interest. He has made no decisions on anything that would impact the person you're questioning. So that's why the conflict of interest law matters, is because these do have very clear rules we're supposed to follow. There are very clear things we're not supposed to do. And I can tell you that Minister Mickey Emery is in no conflict of interest.
Thank you. And we have time for two more questions. We're going to take one more from the phones, then we'll go to James. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Thank you. Rahim Mohammed at Post Media.
Well, Premier, so as leader of the UCP, do you plan to put in place any sort of in-house policy relating to members of your cabinet and caucus publicly taking sides in a possible referendum on Alberta independence?
Well, I can tell you what our our policy says, because this was part of the founding documents that brought together the Progressive Conservatives and the Wild Rose. And it says loyalty to a united Canada and a commitment for Alberta to be a leader in the Canadian Federation that constructively defends the best interest of the province and its constitutional sovereignty is one of the founding statements of our party. And so I would say that I and my caucus are supportive of that we are supportive of trying to find a way to exercise our constitutional sovereignty within a united Canada.
Sure, and one of your caucus members, Jason Stephanon, a MLA for Red Deer, reportedly told reporters yesterday in Edmonton that he would like to see a referendum. Have you had a chance to talk to Mr. Stephan? Does that come close to a line for you? Do you have any kind of a reaction to that statement? Well,
if you listen to what I said yesterday, I would say that there's 3 different groups in Alberta, and we don't want to demonize any one of them, that we want to have a constructive conversation. We all have different ideas about how we get respect from Ottawa and how we have a constructive relationship within a united Canada. And so I'm looking forward to having that discussion, and I'm not going to be demonizing anybody who may have a different view on me. All I can do is try to convince people my view is right, that it's worth fighting for, is worth giving it a try, is worth doing the negotiation, and it's worth trying to find some way for the federal government to compromise. So that's been my position, and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to convince all Albertans that that's the right pathway.
Thanks, Rahim. We have time for one last question. We'll go to James at the back here.
Hi, Premier. James from the Western Standard. You mentioned in your statement that any referendum will have to respect treaty rights. We've spoken about that. What would the referendum question look like? I realize this is a long potentially a long time in the future, and would negotiations with First Nations have to come first before any referendum question is asked?
I don't know what the referendum question would look like, because yesterday I specifically said we would not be bringing forward as a government a question on the issue of independence. So it would be up to individuals to draft that question and go through a process with lawyers that they might consult, and then it would go and get validated through Elections Alberta, and then it would be put to the people. So I don't have any idea what the wording of that referendum question might be.
Okay, well, where do negotiations with First Nations communities fit into that process?
Again, there is no referendum question. There is no petition campaign. We haven't even put the structure in place for the Elections Act. So I don't have answers to those questions, because until we see an actual active question and an active petition campaign, it really is just hypothetical.
Perfect. Thank you. And that's our time for today.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone, for your questions.